Hi everyone, I'm Amanda from Prana Thrive and I have with me here Tracey from Prana Thrive. We are both functional naturopaths and we help clients with a whole range of health issues, but very much specializing in the area of the gut microbiome. So in today's video, we are going to talk about the gut-brain connection, which is a really fascinating area and is something that we have found is extremely helpful in understanding so that we can really help people with stress-related and many other related health issues. So we're going to talk about what is the gut-brain connection, some of the different bacteria that are associated, foods and things that information that you can take home that can be helpful. So I think Tracey was going to start with talking a little bit about the gut-brain connection and what that is.
Yeah, sure. So I think we now have a huge amount of science to actually show how the brain and the gut are interconnected and how they are interconnected. So it is quite complex and we're still learning a lot in the area, but the brain signals down to the gut and the gut signals up to the brain. So that's why it's called the gut-brain connection. So it's connected via a vagus nerve, and that vagus nerve is multiple fibers. It's not just one nerve from the brain down to the gut. And so those multiple fibers then spread out to all the organs and the rest of the body. So through that vagus nerve, there is the connection there, but there's also the enteric nervous system, which is specifically in the gut. So we have the nervous system in the gut talking to the vagus nerve and sending signals up to the brain. So whatever's going on in the brain will be impacting the gut, and whatever's going on in the gut will be impacting the brain. And so why is this so important to understand? Is because if we've got inflammation in the brain, that's going to impact the signaling down to the gut. And if we've got inflammation in the gut, it's going to impact the signaling to the brain. Mm-hmm. So we need to be asking what is causing inflammation of the brain and what's causing inflammation in the gut. And they're all connected. So it's not like it's just one thing, they all feed into one another. And so to even make this more complex, we also have the immune system that is impacted by the vagus nerve. And there's a really direct correlation and communication between the immune system, the vagus nerve, and the neuro-endocrine, so the neurotransmitters and hormones. So they're all those three, the brain, the gut, the immune system and hormones and neurotransmitters all feeding into each other.
That's right. Yeah.
So we need to be treating really holistically. We need to be looking at the whole patient because it's not as simple as just looking at the gut in isolation, and it's not as simple as looking at the brain in isolation. So very commonly, we're talking about the gut-brain connection here. So very commonly people would have anxiety, depression, and mainstream medical would be prescribing or offering a antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication. But we need to be asking why? Why is there a disruption to your neuroendocrine system? Why is there an imbalance in those hormones and neurotransmitters, which is commonly seen as a cause for anxiety and depression? So it's very complex, and I hope I gave a little bit of an understanding of that complexity and all the things that us as naturopathic practitioners are looking at when clients come to see us, because it is complex. We can't just look at the gut in isolation. We can't just look at the brain in isolation. Maybe I'll hand it over to you now as to what we're looking for in the gut microbiome, because we know very specific bacteria impact the inflammation in the gut. that impact the gut permeability and all of these things that influence the health of the nervous system, the enteric nervous system, etc.
Yeah, that's right, Tracey. And it is a very complex system. Our body is a very complex system. So understand, and then our microbiome is a very complex system, our ecosystem that will be influencing a lot of different areas of the body, but particularly our mental and emotional state. So I would say also, just as far as symptoms, you mentioned anxiety and depression, which many people are experiencing. And obviously there are for many different reasons, but understanding, yes, how we can get to the root cause or the why, that's what we really focus on. Why, are people experiencing the symptoms that they are, or feeling the way that they are? And interestingly, I would say that some of related symptoms like brain fog, lack of concentration, inability to recall, or just not really taking in information is something that so many, almost a shocking level of people are actually experiencing at all different age brackets. So I regularly have clients that, say if they're age 60 years and plus, and they've been to see their doctor, and their doctor says, oh, you are starting to get a bit old. Oh my goodness. Like that's, yes, we age, things will happen, but I have just as many clients in maybe their 20s and 30s that have those same type of brain fog, lack of concentration, memory sort of situations. So it's really, really important to understand how we can improve those by looking at our gut bacteria. So Tracey and I love to use a gut microbiome test. It gives us so much amazing information. And when we're looking at that test, we're looking at all the different areas, like Tracey just mentioned, linking to our body's immune response, whether there is inflammation in relation to leaky gut. So for example, there's a really important bacteria called Akkermansia, and Akkermansia is important for supporting your gut lining. So if your test results are indicating a low level, or we see many clients that are totally missing that particular bacteria, it is just depleted so much over time that it is got to the point that there is no longer any of that bacteria there. And so if it is a non-detected or a low level of Akkermansia, then we get a certain level of inflammation at the gut lining level. And so then that inflammation will create an immune response that creates inflammation, and it definitely can start to trigger those brain fog, lack of concentration, or fatigue, like mental, emotional fatigue, reduced abilities to deal with stress, and then that can snowball to the point of anxiety or even depression, and insomnia is a whole category as well. So that's just one. We have many other types of bacteria that, for example, inflammation. I'll keep on the area of inflammation. If we have a high level of LPS, lipopolysaccharides, in which we can look at and understand from this type of test relating to some inflammatory bacteria. If we have too much inflammatory bacteria, which they can also be really fed by stress. So when we're feeling stressed, when we're thinking about things that are stressful, that can often cause us to maybe not be looking after our health as well as what we could. In those stressful times, we may crave more sugars or crave more alcohol or caffeine. And all of those foods, even though they may feel that they help us in the short term, they can really feed some of those inflammatory bacteria that are already creating part of the issue. So then we end up with an overgrowth of those inflammatory or high LPS producing bacteria. And then we start to get quite an inflammatory immune response that can also be part of why we're experiencing that anxiety and other brain related issues as well. So did you want to say something, Tracey?
Did you want to talk about E. coli?
Oh, yes, of course, E. coli. So we have a beneficial species of E. coli that is really important for supporting our body's production of L-tryptophan. And L-tryptophan, our body will use to help make serotonin and melatonin. So serotonin is our happy hormone. It's what helps us to mentally focus, to be motivated. It helps support our mood. It helps reduce feelings of stress and anxiety. If we look overall, actually our whole microbiome, more than 90% of our body's serotonin actually relates to, or is produced, I should say, by our gut bacteria. So understanding bacteria that are very important and associated with that production is quite helpful. And then, so that's serotonin, which is more during the day. Melatonin is our night or our sleep hormone. and that will be impacted by that particular bacteria. I mean, that will also be impacted by a lot of other stress factors as well. But if we can first understand whether we have a good level of that bacteria or not, and if we don't, how we can use certain probiotics and foods to feed that bacteria, then we can really support those hormonal pathways. Tracey, that is something that I see is deficient in so many, I would say most people, that particular E. coli. And then just to touch on a little bit about some of the foods, like for that bacteria, for example, we can make sure that we're eating a lot of resistant starch foods in our diet, because resistant starch is something that feeds that particular bacteria, but other related bacteria for our brain health and our nervous system. And a lot of people are eating those resistant starch foods. So when I discuss those with clients, we've got things like sweet potato, rice, beans and lentils are also a great resistant starch, but not for everyone. Definitely they can trigger some issues as well. So that's something we work on, why certain foods are not being tolerated. And then we have things like green banana flour is a really great option to use in smoothies, to use in baking. And those are just some of the foods that can really help to feed that particular E. coli. And then if your microbiome test is indicating a 0 or non-detected level, then we can use a very specific probiotic to help reseed or recolonize that bacteria. And then we're also using diet to continue to feed that. That's definitely an area that I've found extremely helpful for clients, especially people who have been on medication, are on medication to help with their anxiety or depression or insomnia as well is a common area that those types of medications are prescribed. Understanding the microbiome and addressing those areas while still on medication, but then being able to look at whether that medication can be changed, whether they can come off that eventually as well. That is an area that both Tracey and I have been able to help people with. Of course, it's important to speak with your doctor as well.
I just wanted to touch on, I think I've already explained it, but I just something you said around the brain fog and the anxiety, the depression. But yeah, we see a lot of people with brain fog, and what's happening is there is inflammation in the brain. If you are depressed, if you're anxious, if you have brain fog, there's inflammation in the brain, and that inflammation is going to impact the vagus nerve. So it's not just the gut impacting the brain, but it's that bi-directional communication that they're feeding into one another. So we need to somehow stop that inflammation so that brain fog can reduce, so it can start to calm down the vagus nerve. Yeah, so that is one question that I'd be asking to figure out, is the brain impacting the down direction just as much as is the gut bacteria impacting the up communication to the brain? So
yeah, that's right. And that's what we have, that holistic approach. So we're understanding or initially asking lots of questions to understand where certain symptoms are coming from, or, different stress factors that may be contributing to the way we're thinking and feeling, which then is impacting on our gut. And then also in understanding where our gut bacteria is impacting on our brain health as well. There's a whole whole group of different types of bacteria that are now being classed as psychobiotics. So psychobiotics are simply those beneficial bacteria that have a really positive impact on our neurotransmitters. So things like our GABA pathway, for example, that really helps to provide more of a calming and a feeling of relaxation. And that's an area that I definitely see a lot of people with very low levels of those types of bacteria. There's a group called lactobacillus, which I commonly see quite low. There's another group called bifidobacterium, and many people are actually missing sometimes an entire group of those related bacteria. And so therefore they've got a reduced GABA pathway or reduced ability to deal with stress. So then we look at those particular species, how we can support them with our diet, where we may need to use some very specific probiotics, sometimes where we may need to use some very high doses of certain probiotics as well, usually for a short period of time. But that's something that I've definitely found extremely helpful in providing that more calming effect or reducing that sort of feeling of stress, then then we can really focus on the overall nervous system and immune system and other areas as well.
Yes. And, when all of this information started to come out, I was like, oh, really? Could these particular strains of bacteria impact someone's anxiety levels? And what I'm seeing at a clinical level is yes, like these are really like getting feedback from patients that they are feeling calmer, they are handling stress better. So it's so exciting.
Yeah, no, it is. It is really exciting. And I experienced the same. And as far as brain fog, actually, I would say that is probably in the top 3 symptoms that I see that often can be reduced or resolved really, really quickly. The number of clients I've had say to me that their brain fog has just lifted, has just disappeared, and sometimes in weeks. So it's quite amazing that once we start feeding those bacteria that we need to, how that can really start influencing how our brain can be functioning better in that reduced stress response or reduced brain inflammation that's happening as well. Understanding too that our body is a very complex ecosystem and everyone can experience symptoms slightly differently as well. So a common question I have asked is for someone that's looking to maybe, whether this is the right approach, whether it is their gut bacteria that's causing their health issues. And for obviously people who do have digestive issues, IBS, or some sort of inflammatory bowel disorder, that's very, very specific symptoms relating back to our gut bacteria. But I definitely see a lot of people where they don't feel that they have any digestive symptoms, but they have a lot of anxiety, high levels of stress, sleep issues, immune system related issues. And when we look at their gut microbiome, they are experiencing a high level of inflammation, either leaky gut or dysbiosis. And for that person, it hasn't presented with the more typical digestive symptoms, but instead it's more presented in really impacting their nervous system. And so then the anxiety for that person is extremely high, even though they are not experiencing the digestive issues. It definitely, it's understanding our microbiome is extremely helpful for many different areas of our health.
Yeah, and likewise, some patients say that they're not really having any digestive issues. Their stools are great. I have this one particular client in mind, and she said she has amazing stools and she's passing one every single day as soon as she wakes up. And I'm like, yay, that's awesome. When we get back her microbiome result, the bacteria show that she actually has a lot of constipation. And she also in for a colonoscopy because she had her GP had palpated her belly and wanted to just suss out this bulk that was palpated. She could feel in the gut. So anyway, she went in, had the results come back to me, and the doctor reported that she had chronic constipation. So this client was saying that she had healthy stools, they were well formed, but yet her microbiome was telling me she has really quite bad constipation. She's very prone to constipation. And then when they actually went in and had a look, the doctor said she had very difficult bowels and that she had chronic constipation. Chronic meaning long-term constipation. So she had backed up stools. So it's interesting what we do see when we start to actually test.
Definitely, that's right. And that's the thing, our body can present with different symptoms and every person can be a little bit different in how their symptoms present and what we notice. But using a gut microbiome test, we really are seeing so much. So it is such a great tool that we can identify some really, really specific markers and specific areas. Find Tracey having that extra medical test, a colonoscopy, is a great option as well. That it's important to look at things in different ways, and that's able to look more at a physical level, and then we're looking at more of a functional level. So for people that have some really long-term serious health issues, having that combined approach is so important and so helpful, obviously.
Yes, and I absolutely love, and I know you do too, going through clients' microbiome results.
Yes.
And I just love how it mars up with actually what's going on with that client. Yeah, I wanted to also point out that I think testing is really important, really essential. So, we get a lot of clients come to us that have been trying for so long to treat themselves, or they have been to other practitioners. And what we do at Prana Thrive is we test. We test the gut microbiome, which is a simple stool analysis, and we also look at the blood work. So we can actually start to see what's going on. So we're not just guessing. Yes, we take a thorough medical history so we can see what's going on with a patient, but we also looking really deeply into those tests and seeing how everything is connected. And I think that's why we get such good results, is because we see what's going on, we create a plan, and then we give clients that support. And when people are just trying to do it on their own, it gets very confusing, very overwhelming. You tend to not stick at things long enough. We're constantly troubleshooting and to make sure that you are on track, that maybe we just need to stay with it a little bit longer. We can see some results. Just troubleshooting is a really, I think, important part of what we do on top of the testing.
Yeah, definitely. It really is, Tracey, that ongoing support and checking in on clients' progress. But even just the level of information that we get from the microbiome tests that we use is so detailed. And there's many different types of microbiome tests. They're not all the same. The one that we use is using a DNA sequencing. So it's providing with a very comprehensive understanding of all of your gut bacteria. And the report that we receive from the lab is 42 pages. So it is just amazing information for us to understand that we've been doing for quite a number of years now. So it's something that we are very familiar with, scrolling through those many pages of information and knowing what to look for, and then creating that plan that's really specific for the client, and then checking in on their progress. But also the test results itself provides a lot of information as far as not what is just needing to be addressed, but maybe how long, every person's body is different, but, a realistic idea of how long things will take, which you just touched on, Tracey, which I think is so important, because sometimes there may be things that are only slightly out of balance, and depending on the type of bacteria, how easily we may be able to address that with certain probiotics and foods or other gut healing remedies. And then for some people, the level of inflammation and the different things that need to be addressed that show up in that test there's a lot of different markers. And so that's going to take a certain amount of time, because if we've got lots of LPS inflammation and bacteria that need to be addressed, that's creating the brain fog and adding to the anxiety, for example, then we really need to focus on how we can clear those out using some really specific antimicrobial remedies. Anything that we use with clients is very well researched. We're very particular, I would say fussy, about the remedies that we choose to use with our clients and the benefits that they get from those. If there is leaky gut, which relates to Akkermansia, but it relates to some other related bacteria as well. So if we've got very low levels, we know that it's going to take a minimum 3 months to really address that. It's very possibly going to take a good 6 months, and for some people even longer. So it doesn't mean it's going to take you that long to feel the benefits, but we know from the level of inflammation from that test result that it's going to take a particular time frame, and there's certain things that we can address quickly or in the short term, and then there are other things that we will really need to focus on in the long term. And that, I think, is a really big difference with how we work and the programs that we run, so that our clients also understand what we're working on and they have a little bit of a future plan. So even if we're not speaking again for a month and we've got a certain number of consults over the next following months, they at least know the sort of things that we're going to be addressing and what their plan is going to look like, compared to maybe if we're just going symptom by symptom and not using some type of test like we're explaining, that you could be eating the right foods, taking the right probiotics, but it's still guesswork. You're not really knowing how far do you need to go. So that's something that I definitely find is really helpful to give our clients the confidence to know what they're working working on, because that's definitely something I think you would agree, Tracey, that when people are maybe inquiring with us, looking to say, okay, is this going to be the right approach for my health? And sometimes people think, oh, I'll just keep following. Oh, I've just started an elimination diet, or I've just started a particular supplement. I'll just see how that goes. And that's totally fine. You can do that, but you're still guessing. You don't really know. You could be heading in the right direction. You could be heading in the opposite direction. So that's something that Tracey and I are very, very specific about, the using a test, understanding the information, and then creating a plan that is very, very specific to you, and not just to your microbiome as well, really understanding what other factors we may need to address. So if it's relating to a particular bacteria, but like Tracey mentioned in the very start, the connection between our brain health and our microbiome, so stress factors, sleep, our immune system, all of our different hormone pathways, which will be slightly different for men and women as well. And so understanding where we may need to help you support your body in a number of ways to support your microbiome as well. So it's not just about your gut bacteria.
Yeah. And just to go back to what you're saying in regards to treatment plans and where to go from there based off the client's symptoms and what's going on for them and their microbiome test, we need to do things in a certain order as well. And one big mistake that I think people are doing is not knowing what's going on. So they're trying to do things that are probably way too advanced for where their gut is at.
Definitely.
For an example, your gut microbiome love fiber. But if you don't have the gut bacteria that break down fiber, you're going to do really bad with fiber. So we've got to slowly increase the amount of bacteria that break down that fiber so you can increase your fiber.
Exactly.
That will feed the bacteria, which will then cycle. So we slowly work our way up and build that bacteria, but it has to be really, really slowly. So often you could be having really healthy foods, but it's not great for your gut at this specific time. So that's where we coach you through what is going to be right for you. And we go back and forth to try and work out how we can tier that up to support your gut microbiome, because that's ultimately what we want. We want lots of fiber. We want lots of omega-3s. We need good quality protein.
Definitely.
What else does the gut love? Lots of colors, lots of antioxidants and polyphenols. The gut microbiome love that variety of fruit and vegetables. So if you are so sensitive to foods that you're on a very limited diet, then again, the same principle applies. We need to heal the gut a little bit so we can increase a little bit more of the fruit and veg that you couldn't tolerate before. And slowly, as we work on that, you can then eventually have a really diverse diet of fruit and veg and other foods that you couldn't tolerate before. And your gut microbiome are going to need that, and they love it.
Definitely. And one of my favorite things that I do have most days is a smoothie with berries, with a mix of like chia and hemp seeds, coconut yogurt. Sometimes I'll add, that's on a basic level. I may add many other green powders and all sorts of things, but usually I just try and keep it fairly simple. And for clients that we're starting, if they've not done that before, keeping it quite simple, understanding how important those particular foods are. So berries, for example, are really high in polyphenols. Such a great way to feed some really important gut bacteria, but also start to improve our liver function as well, which is a very important digestive organ. And actually, that's really an interesting area we haven't touched on too much, which I think could be a whole nother video. But just to understand that some people are actually experiencing anxiety and also even insomnia because of liver areas that are deficient. So liver toxicity or sluggish liver, there's a very strong then relation to our gut bacteria influencing our liver, but how our liver influences our gut bacteria. And so they're the sort of things we're starting to look at with each person to see what areas we need to address. But yeah, just coming back to my favorite smoothie is having, that extra fiber with the seeds, so like the chia and hemp seeds, and a little bit of coconut yogurt. I like the flavor of, coconut yogurt. So that's just a really, really great combination that I know every day is helping to feed my gut bacteria. And it makes a big difference.
Yes, I am exactly the same. I think a smoothie is a great way to start the day. And I always encourage some vegetables in my clients' smoothies because we simply don't get enough vegetables in our diet. And having a smoothie doesn't mean you can't put fruit in it and make it nice and tasty. But yeah, putting in some zucchini is a great one
Yeah,
because
definitely.
that makes it nice and creamy. Or some cucumber if you want it nice and super fresh. Rocket is actually really nice. If got a green smoothie, it makes it nice and it's got a really nice tang with the rocket. Cos lettuce is got lots of nutrients in it. Don't go iceberg lettuce, but cos lettuce. Just putting in a little bit here, a little bit there. It all adds up.
Yeah, definitely. I love rocket. That's a staple. We buy giant bags of rocket from our organic grocer. So a little bit goes maybe in the smoothie, more in a salad, but they're really great vegetables that you can add in, especially zucchini. That's a great one because it doesn't really have much of a flavor. I feel like zucchini is something you can add into almost anything. And it
Yes.
provides, it's a low carb vegetable as well. So if you're someone who's very sensitive to carbohydrate foods, or you're following more of a keto style or low carb diet, zucchini is just such a great vegetable to have. And I think, both Tracey and I, we have our own story and background as far as different health issues that we've had over the years, which ultimately led us to the path to become naturopaths and do the work, especially the gut health work that we do. And so when I think this is a very long time for me personally now, which I'm very grateful for, but when I think about 15 to 20 years ago when I could only eat about 5 to 10 foods and, trying to follow a gluten-free diet, a candida diet. Gluten-free foods didn't really exist, back then either. So, or if they did, it was like eating cardboard. And so all of our amazing superfoods that we have now definitely makes things easier. But, when I'm working with clients, especially when I'm starting off, I have that memory and that understanding of how frustrating and how limiting it is when you feel you can only eat a very small number of foods. So, a lot of our clients do come to us at that point, at that starting point. And so, like Tracey just said, just starting to add, a few new things, but also then understanding why it's not. Of course, there are certain foods, processed foods, glutens, sugars, inflammatory foods that are ideal for all of us to eat very limited or not at all. But there are many people reacting to those fibers, like Tracey said, vegetables, broccoli, the cauliflower, things that are so nutritious. Why is our body not digesting those? And I know we talked about different symptoms relating to anxiety, brain fog, and so on. But I definitely have had a number of clients over the years notice that they feel really anxious after eating a certain food. They might not feel bloated or have that typical food reaction, but they just feel a very heightened sense of stress and anxiety to either a particular food or a particular meal, particular time of the day, or sometimes every time. Sometimes people say, every time I eat, I feel really anxious afterwards. And, that is obviously a very key symptom relating back to our gut bacteria. But that's why we love to use this test to really understand which bacteria. And sometimes it is many. There's often not one thing. It would be amazing if we only ever had one thing. Usually it's not. There's many things, but, we create a plan that is not working on many things at one time. Like Tracey pointed out, there's a very particular sequence, a particular order of things that we need to address depending on what shows up. And so really working on those step-by-step areas to incorporate those foods, reduce that anxiety response, feed those really, really important gut-brain connecting bacteria.
Yes, and I think that is a very important point. You've got to know what's going on in the gut and what the dynamics of that bacteria, what's going on there. But I wanted to mention that the behavior, food and behavior, and how it impacts behavior, how food impacts behavior is something that I'm so passionate about because of my own personal experiences. So it's like this, again, this catch-22, they all feed into one another. When you've got the imbalances in the gut, it then creates inflammation, it impacts the immune system, so you're more prone to being affected by foods. Your gut starts to react to it, which then creates more inflammation, which then, the inflammation is sending information up to the brain, causing inflammation up there, changes in mood and behavior, etc. So how that is all connected. But that also reminds me that we need to talk about how the gut is no different with ADD or autism and other neurological conditions. We now know that Parkinson's and Alzheimer's is influenced by the gut bacteria.
Definitely,
and so many other conditions. So, we are not saying the gut bacteria is the cause of these conditions, but they absolutely influence those conditions, and we see that clinically, but also the science is pointing to that direction as well.
There's so much new science on what you meant, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and understanding where those associated extra factors, or how we can improve, how we can reduce the progression or even prevent, obviously, at an early stage, and also understanding. There's a lot of research on the oral microbiome, so all the bacteria in our mouth. That is definitely a whole nother topic for us to discuss. That's a really interesting area, understanding our different oral microbiome, linking to our gut microbiome, and some of those bacteria we can test for in a gut microbiome test, because there are some bacteria that if, like inflammatory bacteria, that if they are present in the mouth, they are quite resilient to stomach acid, and for a lot of people their stomach acid is not high enough anyway, and so then it is going through their digestive system and it is picked up in a stool test, but it's bacteria that's been directly related to the oral microbiome. So we can start to understand a little bit of that information. And I would say I have many clients, whereas once I look at that and then start asking those extra questions, if it didn't already come up in our first session, understanding if they have gum inflammation or if they have had lots of fillings or easily have plaque buildup, and then linking that to often feelings of extra anxiety, brain fog, lack of concentration. So there is a very important link to understand there as well.
Yes. So I think maybe in summary, if anyone is experiencing some sort of mood or behavioral type issue, whether it be anxiety, depression, low moods, OCD, autism, ADD, that consider that the gut is impacting your symptoms. And the best way to actually see what's going on in the gut is to do a gut microbiome test.
That's it. Yeah. So we have a really great article. If you want to read more information, we do have a gut brain connecting article on our website, which I'll link below. But like Tracey said, if it's something that you're wondering whether your symptoms are linked to your gut or whether it's something that we can help, we always offer a free gut evaluation call. And that's available for anyone that's interested. It is totally obligation free. It is simply to discuss with one of my team your symptoms, your concerns, and for us to understand whether there is links there or it's an area that we can help with. And if so, then we have a number of different ways that we can help. So was there anything else you wanted to mention in today's session, Tracey?
No, I think there's some topics that we should go into in much deeper detail in other sessions that we do together.
Definitely,
sure.
Definitely. We have endless number. So excellent. Thank you for listening. I really hope you found that helpful. Like we said, if you're looking for help, we do work with people on a personal level. So there is some information below. Thank you. Thanks, Tracey.
Thank you. See you later.